I woke from a coma to find my wife holding my brother's hand, wearing my father's watch. Everyone thinks I'm too damaged to remember what happened. They don't know I saw everything. And I've been waiting to act. I bought my wife a dress for our anniversary, and she wore it to stand over my hospital bed and spit in my face while I was trapped in a coma. When I finally opened my eyes, she held my hand, smiled sweetly, and whispered, "You don't remember anything, do you?" I squeezed her hand back. That was 3 weeks ago. This morning, I watched her lose her mind on a cop as they took my father's watch off her wrist. The accident happened on an ordinary morning. I was on my way to work, half thinking about my to-do list, when I swerved and slammed into a pole. The world went black. Doctors told my wife and my brother there was little hope I'd ever wake up. But here's what no one knew: I wasn't gone. I was still in here. I could hear everything. I could feel everything. I just couldn't move. Couldn't speak. My mind was screaming behind a body that had betrayed me. As soon as the doctor left the room, she dropped my hand like it was toxic. I heard the faint creak of leather, the exact sound of the anniversary dress I'd bought her. My chest burned when I heard another voice behind her. My brother's voice. Terrence. Their laughter tangled together like it had been rehearsed. 8 years of this, she muttered. 8__years. The words hit me like someone had poured ice water straight into my veins. Terrence's hand brushed her neck, and suddenly, every late night he'd crashed at our place made perfect sense. Every so-called business trip where he'd volunteered to check in on her. The mattress dipped as she sat beside me, her hip pressing into my ribs. Her breath was hot against my ear. You know what the worst part is? He actually thinks I love him. Brings me flowers every Friday like clockwork. Something scraped against the bed rail, her wedding ring. She leaned over, studying my unblinking face. Her nail jabbed my cheek, digging in, leaving a little crescent-shaped dent in flesh that couldn't react. God, just looking at him makes me sick, she spat. Warm wetness slid down my cheek toward my ear. Terrence picked up my chart and tossed it onto my legs. Papers scattered. Neither of them bothered to pick them up. I felt my father's Rolex unstrap from my wrist. That watch had survived 30 years of hard construction work. My dad gave it to me on his deathbed. Now Terrence slid it onto his own wrist like it had always belonged to him. Remember when he showed us this? He said casually. Said it'd be mine when he died. Guess he was right. Vanessa went through my wallet next, spreading its contents across my chest like she was pricing them for a garage sale. The black Amex card vanished into her purse. She held up a honeymoon photo, her nail dragging down the middle, and then ripped it clean in half. They ordered takeout from my favorite Chinese place, the same one we'd gone to on our very first date. Containers sat on my legs as they talked about my funeral between bites. Sauce dripped onto my hospital gown. Her chopsticks tapped against her teeth, that little sound I used to think was cute. Now it was torture. My phone was in the bedside drawer. Terrence pulled out my limp hand, bent my thumb back to unlock it. Pain shot through the joint, but I couldn't make a sound. He scrolled through my accounts while Vanessa leaned in, her hair brushing my face. 2 million in Bitcoin, Terrence muttered, showing her the screen. My mom called in the middle of their looting spree. Vanessa answered with perfect fake sobs. After she hung up, the disgust in her voice was venomous. Your mother never liked me. Always thought I wasn't good enough for her precious boy. Then she gripped my hand so hard her nails dug into my palm. If only she knew her other son has been under for me since before the wedding. And that's when everything fell into place. Their two clothes dancing at my wedding, her pushing for Terrence to be my business partner, all those late-night office hours. Terrence was pacing at the foot of my bed, practicing something. His stance, his tone, he was rehearsing my eulogy. While I was still breathing 6 feet away. Time crawled. They called lawyers. Accountants. They started dismantling my company, making a list of which employees to fire. Vanessa used my chest as a desk to jot notes. Every pen stroke pressed through the paper into skin I couldn't defend. As night fell, she stood in the bathroom, door open, practicing different versions of crying like she was auditioning for a role. Terrence counted my things, watches, cufflinks, even the signed baseball from Dad. Every nerve in my body screamed to move. And then something broke through. My index finger twitched. Just once. Vanessa saw it. The nail polish bottle in her hand slipped and shattered on the tile. Red spread across the floor like blood. They froze, staring at my hand like it might explode. It moved again. No, she whispered. No, 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 no. My eyes opened. Not all the way, but enough to lock on them. Terrence's knuckles turned white around the bed rail. The Rolex on his wrist caught the light. My throat burned around the ventilator. Every muscle screamed to rise to grab them, but all I could manage was another twitch. The door slammed open. A nurse rushed in, eyes wide at the sight of me awake. She checked the monitors, called for the doctor. Vanessa and Terrence stepped back, scrambling to compose themselves. Dr. Gerard came in fast, shining a light in my eyes, asking me to blink once for yes, twice for no. Could I hear him? 1 blink. Did I know where I was? 1 blink. Was I in pain? 2 blinks, but that pain wasn't physical. They removed the ventilator slowly. My throat felt like sandpaper, but I could breathe again. Vanessa rushed to my side, tears pouring down her face, squeezing my hand like she'd never let go. Behind her, Terrence adjusted the Rolex, avoiding my gaze. The doctor explained my miraculous recovery with words like traumatic brain injury and medically induced coma. Through it all, I kept quiet, nodding, giving single-word answers. Let them think I was still weak. Still foggy. When I finally spoke, I just said her name. She leaned in and I caught the faint smell of Chinese food on her breath. Her hand squeezed mine, a warning hidden in affection. I squeezed back just enough for her to know my strength was coming back. The nurse announced visiting hours were over. Vanessa protested, but policy won. She kissed my forehead, lips cold. Terrence patted my shoulder with mock brotherly concern before they left. Alone with the medical staff, I answered their basic questions, my name, the year, the president. I made a few small mistakes on purpose. Nothing big. Enough to make them think my mind was recovering. But the truth? I remembered everything. Night crept in like a slow tide, and the room felt heavier with every hour. A new nurse rotated in, younger, brisk, checking 4 lines, jotting vitals, adjusting settings. She came and went like clockwork, each visit leaving me alone just long enough to keep testing the limits of my body. First the fingers. Then the hands. My arms moved in jerky, stubborn bursts, muscles screaming from even the smallest motion after being still for so long. My legs were worse, the left prickled with pins and needles, the right hung like dead weight below the knee. I thought of the Bitcoin wallet, $2 million sitting in digital limbo. The password was our anniversary date and the name of the street where we had our first kiss. Terrence might have my phone, but he'd need more than my thumb to get in. That thought was the only cold comfort I had. Morning hit me with a whole new war. Maria, the physical therapist, showed up early. She was no nonsense, the kind of person who didn't waste time on pity. She yanked the blinds open, rolled me upright, and within seconds the room spun like I'd been drinking all night. My stomach lurched. She held a basin while I dry heaved nothing but air. Standing? Impossible. My knees gave out before I even got my weight under me. Maria caught me, her grip strong, lowering me back to bed. She talked about muscle atrophy, about how hard the climb back would be. I nodded like I was listening, but my head was busy running damage reports, wondering how much they'd already stolen. Vanessa breezed in mid-morning with roses, not the daisies I'd bought her every Friday. She wore a muted dress, the kind you wear to church or funerals, playing the part of the devoted wife who'd been given a miracle. She adjusted my pillows, spoon-fed me sips of water, made sure the nurses saw her doting. When the room emptied, her whole face shifted. She leaned in, lips brushing my cheek as if for a kiss, but her whisper was pure threat. You don't remember anything, do you? The accident scrambled your brain. It wasn't a question. It was an order. I let my eyes glaze over, let a muddled sound escape my throat. She relaxed just enough to believe it. Her phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of her screen, a message from Terrence. Something about meeting lawyers that afternoon. The neurologist swept in with MRI results, bruising, swelling, cognitive impairment, memory gaps. Words meant to prepare her for the worst. My personal hell was sitting there, silent, while I listened to my wife and my brother plan my funeral menu over lo mein. I played my role perfectly, asking him to repeat simple things, fumbling easy answers. Vanessa took notes like a good spouse. Maria came back later, pushing my body harder. My left leg could twitch, flex, even hold weight for a second. The right still refused to cooperate. She mentioned possible nerve damage but promised we'd fight it. I barely slept between sessions, every footstep in the hall sounding like it might be them. I lived in a half-dream of paranoia, waiting for the next knife in the back. That night, Mom arrived. Vanessa must have prepped her. Mom's eyes were red, her voice shaking as she told me how terrified she'd been. I wanted to tell her everything, but Vanessa hovered like a warden. Mom mentioned the business, how Terrence was handling things. Employees had sent a card. She'd brought personal items from home, but Vanessa intercepted the bag, rummaging through it like TSA. Nothing useful. When visiting hours ended, Mom kissed my forehead, promising to come back. Vanessa linked arms with her, the perfect daughter-in-law, her posture snapping cold the second they stepped past the door. That night was all strategy. They thought they'd buried the real me in that coma, but I remembered every laugh, every insult, every stolen thing. My body was weak. My mind was razor sharp. The Bitcoin was safe for now, but my business? My employees? Every second I stayed in here, they bled it dry. The midnight nurse was friendly, chatty, telling me how lucky I was to have a wife and brother who barely left my side. I smiled weakly, letting her believe the fairy tale. The pins and needles in my legs grew constant. Healing. I flexed my feet under the blanket, invisible to the monitors. Tomorrow I'd give Maria just enough progress to look believable, never too much. Maria became my cover. 7 a.m. sharp, she arrived with her clipboard, running me through exercises. I made sure to wobble dramatically on my left leg even though it could take more weight now. The right remained truly unpredictable, which only helped my disguise. Mid-session, Vanessa slipped in carrying my home office briefcase. She waited for Maria to step out, then laid out the contents on the table, power of attorney, bank authorizations, asset transfers. One by one she pressed a pen into my hand. My grip failed every time. My shaky signatures were barely legible. She didn't like that, but she moved to the next page anyway. When Maria came back with resistance bands, Vanessa scooped everything up, murmuring about insurance forms. That afternoon, Dr. Gerard sent in a psychologist for cognitive testing, puzzles, memory cards, problem-solving games. I failed half on purpose. Vanessa soaked up every professional confirmation that my brain was broken. Terrence showed up just as the testing wrapped. My father's watch gleamed on his wrist. He played the charming brother for the nurses, then pulled Vanessa aside. I caught bits of their hushed conversation, permanent disability, care facility. She showed him my shaky signatures, he critiqued them like a forger. The next morning, Maria brought a walker. She supported almost all my weight, but the effort was real, 3 steps from the bed before my right knee buckled. Pain shot up my side and I let it. Maria mentioned rehab centers. Vanessa's interest spiked instantly. She asked about visiting rules, lengths of stay. Maria handed her brochures without knowing she'd just fed the enemy. The occupational therapist followed, giving me simple tasks, buttoning a shirt, holding a cup. Perfect chances to look useless. Vanessa documented everything with her phone. Mom visited again with homemade soup. She fed me spoon by spoon, her hands trembling. I wanted to tell her the truth so badly I could taste it, but Vanessa sat right there, breathing down my neck. Mom talked about the company, how grateful she was that Terrence had stepped up. Clients had already been informed about the transition. That night, with no one watching, I tested myself. 10 steps holding the bed rail. 15 on a good try. My grip was strong, my fingers steady. But the act was draining me. The next day, Vanessa brought a tablet. She pulled up email after email, contract terminations, account changes, vendor cancellations, and guided my finger to approve them. I made her restart each one with clumsy mistakes. The business I'd built from the ground up was collapsing in days. My fury nearly broke through my mask, but I channeled it into fake muscle spasms. Another MRI showed little improvement. Gerard spoke quietly with them about long-term facilities, places with limited visiting hours. Perfect for shutting me away forever. Maria pushed me harder at the parallel bars. I let my right foot drag and caught myself painfully against the metal. Tears came easy, the ribs she'd pressed during the coma were still tender. Terrence no longer even hid that he was going through my phone. He made notes on clients, suppliers, banks. He'd glance up now and then, checking if I noticed. I kept my eyes empty. The speech therapist came in last. I slurred words, forgot names for simple objects, let her see me as a man whose mind had been scrambled. Vanessa filmed everything, building her case. The therapist spoke of possible recovery. Vanessa's frown said she had other plans. Mom showed up with old photo albums, thinking maybe a trip down memory lane would help jog something. Page after page was Dad, teaching me how to use a wrench, the two of us building the business from the ground up. The day he handed me the Rolex Terrence now flashed on his wrist like he'd earned it. Mom's voice wavered over every photo, her hands shaking. Beside her, Vanessa laid on the false comfort, rubbing Mom's back with the tenderness of a viper pretending to be a kitten. The brochures for rehab facilities kept piling up on my table, glossy covers promising peaceful recovery and serene isolation. Vanessa and Terrence were suddenly experts in cost-benefit analysis, gravitating toward places that were 2 hours out of the city. Far enough that familiar faces couldn't just drop by. Far enough that they could control every single narrative about me. Physical therapy hit a wall, deliberately. I'd perfected the art of looking frail while staying stronger than they suspected, but Maria was starting to worry. She mentioned specialist consultations, alternative programs. Vanessa shut it down in a heartbeat, talking about insurance limits and how I wouldn't be able to follow complicated routines. Then came the social worker, clipboard in hand, ready to assess my support network. She spent most of the time with Vanessa, who painted herself as the saintly, sleepless wife drowning in bills and responsibility. The social worker nodded sympathetically, scribbling placement recommended like it was gospel. The Bitcoin haunted me. $2 million just sitting there, locked behind a password only I knew. I'd seen Terrence scrolling through recovery phrase guides, trying to guess combinations. He was running out of time and they both knew it. Vanessa shifted tactics. She timed her signature sessions right after therapy, when my hands naturally trembled from genuine exhaustion. The papers changed too, from simple authorizations to property transfers, investment moves, business ownership shifts. I sabotaged every attempt with perfectly timed spasms. Dr. Gerard started scratching his head at my uneven recovery, some reflexes normal, others still dead. He ordered more neuro testing. Vanessa managed the scheduling, pushing it weeks out. Every delay bought them more time. The walker became my prop. Alone, I could cross the room without help. In front of them, I made every step look like climbing Everest. Maria kept writing her notes, unknowingly reinforcing the idea that I'd never recover. She even suggested a specialist in severe brain injury rehab, a name Vanessa made a point of writing down, but never acted on. Terrence now arrived with contracts. Real, high-stakes deals. I recognized the buyers, competitors who'd been circling the business for years. My company was being carved up and sold for scraps. He tried to steady my hand for signatures. My pen strokes came out jagged and useless. Nights were for truth. I walked unassisted, worked my grip strength, retrained my fingers. Muscle memory came back fast when no one was watching. Vanessa's patience was thinning. She'd grip my arm too tightly, press my hand to the page until my joints hurt. Nurses saw the bruises. She'd instantly switch into teary, apologetic mode. The facility plan solidified. 3 options, all remote, all perfect for cutting me off. Tours were booked, calls made. She controlled Mom's access, telling her that seeing me agitated my recovery. Mom believed her. Medications changed. I was groggy during prime visiting hours, sharper at night. I didn't need to guess whose idea that was. Maria tried one last time to push for aggressive therapy. Vanessa countered with cost and insurance until Maria's frustration was written across her face. The transfer was locked in. 1 week. A long-term brain injury center with minimal rehab and visiting hours restricted to weekends. It was their dream prison for me. Terrence's desperation for the Bitcoin became almost comical, failed attempts stacking up, muttering about deadlines and buyers waiting. Dr. Gerard signed the transfer papers with reluctance. Vanessa packed my things like she was folding a flag at a funeral. Nurses hovered, watching the perfect wife struggle through her heartbreak. The business sell-off went into overdrive. Terrence brought the last of the paperwork. My scrawls grew even worse. He snapped once, eyes flashing, before plastering on his charming mask when staff walked by. Maria hugged me goodbye, slipping a small card into my palm with her number. Vanessa intercepted it in seconds, thanking Maria sweetly as she removed the evidence. Mom found out hours before the move. She came rushing in, tears spilling, while Vanessa held her like a hostage. The morning meds dulled my focus, my body was sluggish. I couldn't warn her. The ambulance crew strapped me to a gurney. Vanessa claimed the seat beside me. Terrence stayed behind to drive my car, my watch, my life. As we rolled toward the elevator, I caught a glimpse of his phone. Another Bitcoin notification. Another failed attempt. The ambulance smelled like bleach and false endings. Vanessa finally let her mask drop, her fingers tapping her purse in a rhythm only she understood. 40 minutes to the facility. 40 minutes to permanent exile. I closed my eyes, mapping every turn, every landmark. My body stayed limp, my mind sharper than ever. They thought they'd won. They thought they were delivering me into the grave they'd been digging for months. They had no idea that I'd been preparing for this moment all along. And soon, I'd show them exactly how awake I really was. The first glimpse of my new prison came through the ambulance window, a sprawling, old-money mansion turned care facility, with perfectly trimmed hedges hiding the bars on the inside. Vanessa's hand clamped tighter on her purse as the ambulance curved into the circular driveway. She couldn't get inside fast enough, already moving ahead to handle the paperwork. While the paramedics wheeled me out, I caught glimpses through the windows, patients in wheelchairs parked by the glass, others shuffling slowly down hallways with walkers. Vanessa's vision for my future was suddenly crystal clear. The intake was slow torture. Vanessa answered every question about my condition like she was my keeper and I was some broken animal she'd found on the side of the road. The facility doctor ran the usual neuro tests. I bombed them spectacularly. Right leg? Dead weight. Left hand? Shaking like a leaf. Tracking a penlight? My gaze wandered like I'd never focused on anything in my life. The doctor's notes, severe impairment, poor recovery odds, were music to her ears. They placed me in a private room upstairs, far from where anyone might accidentally stumble into me. Vanessa played housekeeper, putting my few clothes away, hanging a framed photo of us on the wall for staff to admire. Such a devoted wife, they said. Terrence arrived, Rolex flashing, checking it every few minutes like he was timing my downfall. The administrator gave them a tour while I memorized escape routes, nurse stations, and, most importantly, the location of the medication room. Evening hit. A nurse brought a little paper cup of pills. Vanessa helped me swallow, her eyes sharp, making sure every drop went down. Within minutes, the fog rolled in, thicker, heavier than what they'd given me at the hospital. My mind clawed at consciousness as Vanessa sweetly confirmed to the staff. Weekends only for visitors, it's better for his recovery. Night here was darker, quieter, lonelier. Fewer checks. Longer shadows. I waited for silence, then sat up. My legs wobbled like wet spaghetti, but I stood for 30 seconds before gravity won. It was a start. Morning came with a younger, less experienced physical therapist. She skimmed my file and immediately downgraded my therapy plan. 15 minutes of maintenance exercises and that was it. Exactly what Vanessa would want, just enough to keep me alive, not enough to get me better. Vanessa arrived at lunch with another stack of papers. She timed her visit perfectly to my drug state. Even so, I recognized property transfer forms in the blur. She pushed the pen into my hand, growing irritated when the lines refused to cooperate with my tremors. She finally gave up, promising to try again tomorrow. Days passed. No surprise visits, no old friends stopping by. The place was too far from anything familiar, 20 miles from the nearest town, no buses, no trains. Vanessa had picked her battlefield well. Midweek, Terrence stormed in, frustration painted all over his face. He yanked out my phone, poked at the Bitcoin wallet app. Wrong password. Again. He forced my thumb onto the scanner, error. Tried facial recognition, nothing. His temper cracked just long enough to slam his fist against the wall before a nurse appeared, and suddenly he was grief-stricken big brother again. I overheard more damage reports, the office building sold, employees fired with barely a payout, my largest client gone to a competitor. 20 years of my life gutted in weeks. I let my left leg actually weaken from disuse, just to make the performance airtight. Therapy got cut to twice a week. The foggy meds kept my brain wrapped in cotton during the day, but I'd learned the rhythm, clarity came in predictable windows and I used every second. Vanessa's visits grew shorter but sharper. She brought a lawyer once, a twitchy guy who explained conservatorship like he was doing me a favor. I let spit pool at the corner of my mouth while he talked, just to make him uncomfortable. Nothing got signed. Mom finally got an hour on a Saturday, supervised of course. Vanessa sat between us, steering every word. When Mom asked about Dad's watch, Terrence instinctively touched his wrist and lied smoothly about keeping it safe for me. Mom bought it, grief makes people blind. At night, I watched the medication room like a hawk. 15 feet from my door, keypad lock, 4-digit code. I memorized it one digit at a time during nurses' rounds. Terrence's Bitcoin obsession hit fever pitch. He came armed with a laptop, cables, software, all useless. At one point, he shook me hard enough to rattle my teeth, as if the password might fall out. An orderly walked in and just like that he was overcome with emotion. The care conference was my eavesdropping jackpot. Through the wall I heard the doctor call me a permanent custodial case. Vanessa sniffled her agreement. Transfer to full-time care by the end of the month. Perfect for them. Deadly for me. I started pushing harder at night. 3 steps became 10. My legs burned, my ribs ached, but I was getting stronger while they thought I was fading. 3 days before my final move, Vanessa brought the last wave of documents. Conservatorship. Power of attorney. Asset transfers. Her confidence was so high she barely pretended to be gentle. Some signatures looked real enough. Others? Legally worthless. The Bitcoin was still their holy grail. Terrence dragged in crypto experts who ran every trick in the book. Nothing cracked it. 4 nights before transfer I made my move. The meds wore off at 2 a.m. I slipped out of bed, muscles trembling but holding. The hallway was empty. 15 feet to the medication room. The code was burned into my memory. Inside, shelves lined with pills, the same ones fogging me, and others I could use to sharpen my mind. I pocketed the stimulants I needed, careful not to disturb the rest. Back to bed before the 3 a.m. round. The next morning I palmed the usual fog pills and swallowed the stimulants instead. Cold clarity poured through me. My mind was a scalpel again. 3 days. That was all I had to put my plan into motion. 3 days to turn their trap inside out. Vanessa showed up that morning with the swagger of someone who thought the game was already won. She didn't even lower her voice around me anymore. Permanent care will cost less, she told Terrence, flipping through the conservatorship papers like she was browsing a menu. Once the house sells, we split the money, disappear somewhere warm, and finally be done with this mess. She laughed, sharp, metallic, the sound bouncing off the walls like a blade. That night, during one of my rare windows of clarity, I slipped into the recreation room. The computer sat idle under buzzing fluorescent lights. My fingers flew over the keyboard, muscle memory guiding me through passwords and security measures Vanessa didn't even know existed. Secondary emails. Backup codes. Secure accounts. I sent messages to people who still owed me their loyalty, people who had known me before any of this. Quiet instructions went out. Seeds planted. The next day, Terrence gave the Bitcoin wallet one last shot. He'd brought in newer tech, more advanced tools, and the desperation was all over his face. I lay there, eyes half closed, watching him sweat over $2 million he'd never touch. When he finally quit, his hands were trembling. He didn't see the tiny curl of my lips. The morning of the transfer arrived with a steady drizzle tapping the windows. Vanessa was there early, controlling every detail, making sure every form was signed. She dropped the grieving wife act completely. Now she was just efficient. Cold. The staff praised her strength, and she accepted it like an award. I was loaded into the ambulance without protest. Vanessa slid in beside me, phone to her ear, talking to lawyers about the hearing. She barely looked up, until we passed the turnoff for the facility she'd handpicked. Her brow creased. Where are we going? She asked the driver. Silence. Confusion turned to panic as the ambulance pulled into a completely different driveway, a private rehab center she'd once dismissed as too expensive. The doors swung open and there was Maria, my original physical therapist, clipboard in hand. She'd gotten my message. She'd made calls, pulled strings, and filed an emergency court order stopping my transfer to long-term custodial care. The paperwork was already done. The reevaluation team was waiting. Vanessa's protests were swatted aside. The forged signatures she'd been forcing out of me didn't stand a chance under real scrutiny. The conservatorship collapsed instantly. I looked at her for the first time without the fog, without the act. Her eyes widened. The shock gave way to fear. My voice was raw but steady. I remember everything. I laid it all out, the drugging, the forged documents, the asset grabs. Maria documented everything, my sudden improvement once off the wrong meds, the obvious evidence I was competent. Police arrived within the hour. Terrence barreled in still wearing Dad's watch, but the minute he saw me upright and talking, the confidence drained out of him. I told them about the Bitcoin, about how he'd spent weeks trying to crack it. The password? Not our anniversary. Not the street where we kissed. A phrase Dad had told me my whole life, build with your hands but protect with your head. The cops listened. Financial crimes investigators would take it from here. Vanessa's tears were real now, but not for me. Terrence tried to slip away, only to be stopped at the door. Dad's watch was removed from his wrist, bagged as evidence. Without it, he looked small. Just another thief caught. They were let out separately, their 8-year scheme collapsing in an afternoon. Maria walked me to my new room, bigger, brighter, overlooking a garden. Tomorrow would be day 1 of real rehab. Months of hard work ahead, a business to rebuild, trust to repair. That night, my phone lit with a Bitcoin notification. I typed in the real password. $2 million untouched. Enough to start again. Mom came after dinner. Relief replaced the grief in her eyes as I told her everything. She admitted she'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. We talked until visiting hours ended, already sketching out a future without them. Recovery wouldn't be quick. There would be legal fights, therapy, rebuilding. But I'd stopped needing promises from other people, I'd already proven I could save myself. The game was over. They thought I was broken. They thought they'd buried me. Instead, I'd used their cage to get stronger. Some damage teaches you how to fight. Some prisons teach you how to escape. And sometimes, the act of pretending is the best weapon you have. I closed my eyes not because I had to, but because I chose to. Tomorrow, I'd start reclaiming everything they tried to steal. And this time, I was wide awake. If you enjoyed today's drama, just imagine what's waiting in the next one. Hit like, subscribe, and let's go find the next train wreck together. Thanks for watching.